Good morning, and welcome to Missoula Real Estate Today. This is Denny Bedard. Missoula Real Estate Today is presented by Diane Beck and Becky Peterson, the Beck and Beck team at Windermere Real Estate on News Talk KGVO. Welcome aboard. Always great to have you on Missoula Real Estate Today. Final weekend of September. Good way to wrap it up with an old friend of the show. Been a long time. Sean Murphy, owner of Murphy Radon. Hey, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Danny.
Yes, sir. It's been so long, Sean. We'll do the whole get acquainted or get reacquainted thing. You know what?
It feels like 6 months. I can't believe it's been 2 years.
No, sir. Yeah, it's been almost 2 years for you.
Wow.
What got you into the radon specialist field anyway?
Well, I moved here from Santa Cruz about 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago, and my wife and our first date, she said that this town needed another radon mitigator, and I'd never heard of it. I'm like, huh? What's that? And she says, I don't really know, but
but I know you're the guy.
It comes up a lot, and it's hard to find people to do it. There's not enough people doing it, so that wasn't exactly my childhood dream, but
yeah,
working for myself was, so it all kind of lined up.
It worked out pretty well, yeah. I would say. I know you keep very, very busy. If you look at your logo on your truck or your website, I was curious about this. Your logo has the number 86 above your name and the number 222 below it. Any significance? What's that all about?
Well, it actually it's my second logo because the first one I got sued.
Oh no.
Not exactly. It would have got to that, but I only had one van. It was from Santa Cruz Skateboards. Being from Santa Cruz, being in a different market, I 100% copied their logo. And
well, thinking you're honest about it.
Yeah, thinking it would be no big deal. And
Right.
the letter I got a few months later was very aggressive. So after calling them and just trying to say, hey, I didn't mean, just let them know I didn't mean any disrespect. It was more of a paying tribute. They were flattered, yet, yeah, that's great. Take it down.
Yeah.
So instead of the aggressive 48 hours, I will sue you, they gave me a month after I called them and was
fair enough.
I wasn't trying to, oh, it's different. Oh, it's not exactly like, oh no, I copied you 100%. So then my wife came up with that, and that's basically the periodic table with the RN removed, and the 86 is the atomic number.
Cool.
And the 222 is the atomic weight of radon. And I get asked that almost daily, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Figured you probably did. A lot of this show is shop talk. I figured you had the answer down, Pat. Pretty good on that one.
Yeah.
Missoula Real Estate Today, presented by Diane Beck and Becky Peterson, the Beck and Beck team at Windermere Real Estate. My guest this week, Sean Murphy, owner of Murphy Radon. Yes, we will talk radon. We won't just talk logos and things like that. We might as well start with Radon 101, Sean, for guys like me. What is it, and how does it find its way into homes and businesses?
Well, it's an invisible, odorless, tasteless, radioactive gas, actually, that since most structures are typically going to be negative to the atmosphere around them, that gives it it basically gives it a place to gravitate toward, to move into. So it's from the radioactive decay of uranium, which is everywhere to some degree. So that is how it gets into your house, and typically it comes from the ground, so it works its way from the floor up, and it dissipates after a few days. So one of the common misconceptions is agents a lot, and it's common sense. They're not fools when they say incorrect statements. It's only because the house was closed up really tight for a month. Like, well, okay, so it means it was probably accurate, is what that means. Mm-hmm. It's, no one coming and going, no one, propping windows open, but it doesn't build and build and build. It has a half-life. So
yeah.
Whatever was there a week ago is not there today.
Yeah.
So if it's been closed up for a month, it doesn't, keep storing and building a higher number.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
But to your point there, the fluctuation with radon, if you detect it in one area and measure, and I'm talking about, say, in a concentrated small area,
sure.
If you detect it in one area, measure that, will that measurement stay constant? It sounds it's ever changing and then dissipating, right?
Well, yes. If you mean the same structure,
yeah,
that's why you go off an average when you do test, is because there are so many factors, and it's all air pressure differentials. So whether it's barometric pressure, weather conditions, temperature, things like that, and the way you go about your life in your house, that all contributes to the radon level. So that's why and then geologically, it's it's highly unlikely your neighbor won't have it, but it doesn't mean they do.
Yeah.
It could be even building materials will emit radon, such as granite. But once again, that's also one slab's different to the next. I've never had that be the answer why a house was struggling to get under the EPA line was because I narrowed it down to the countertop. I've never seen it, so please don't mass hysteria. Everyone rip their countertops out, please. I heard something, in this whole thing, everyone heard something from someone, and you never really follow up. But like the granite industry sued the radon industry for basically saying like, oh, there's radon. It's like,
wow.
Yeah, but I don't know any details whatsoever of that. That's just what I heard from someone higher up the chain than me in this game, and it made sense though, because one slab might be emitting tons of radon. It doesn't mean the next one is.
For sure.
Yeah, you just don't set your testing equipment on a granite countertop if you can avoid it when you're retesting. Other than that, I've never really seen it, but sometimes there's tons of stuff deep in the literature of things that can emit radon, and you hear the occasional story where a house is extraordinarily high in a place where it is not known for radon at all, and it turns out the husband passed away, and there's a piece of it. He was a geologist, and there's a piece of some mining equipment that's radioactive in the closet that's throwing everything out of whack.
Oh my goodness!
I've heard a story like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So erratic in its nature that way. I guess that when you brought up that you're kind of looking for an average.
Yes.
Reading.
Because you don't want to chase it hour to hour.
Right. You can possibly detect a location, but not very far from that. I mean, I'm talking about in the same house or
Yes.
next door. It could be noticeably different.
Well, on the testing, on the graph, it breaks it down to a graph that, in theory, you can make sense of if something's going wrong. It's more of a diagnostic tool. But I've had a 48-hour average of 0.3, which is great, with one spike for 1 hour at 20. What the heck's that? It just it more than likely was gusty wind. They say don't test in abnormal weather conditions.
Okay.
When's that here?
Right. Yeah.
It's whatever it's doing. It typically doesn't do here. That's one thing I learned in my last 10 years of being in Montana. It's never this fill in the blank. It's never this windy. It's never this cold. It's never this hot. Usually everything's not on fire. It's always something different every year. So if I were to totally follow the guidelines of not testing during extreme weather, I don't know when I would test.
Missoula Real Estate Today, presented by Diane Beck and Becky Peterson. The Beck and Beck team at Windermere Real Estate here on News Talk KGVO. My guest, Sean Murphy, owner of Murphy Radon here in Missoula. How about, let's see, what other naive questions can I ask you here on my Radon 101 class? Seasonality, will colder or hotter, you mentioned just how unpredictable the weather is in this area. Colder or hotter temperatures have any effect on making it more or less prominent?
100%. So
okay.
I typically see, and this isn't, this rule isn't etched in stone, but what I see is it's roughly, you'll see basically double the radon numbers in the wintertime, even on a house that I've mitigated. So, and mainly some of it would be common sense. The windows are closed because it's snowing. That does not help circulate the radon out. And wind conditions, weather conditions, barometric pressure conditions, and also a big contributor is stack effect. And what stack effect is when warm air rises, when you're heating your house, the hot air is going to rise. Well, that creates a slight, like a draw or a siphon on the ground. It tugs at the radon and pulls it up. It creates a negative air pressure. I'm speculating on the thickness, but let's call it a 1/16 of an inch thick across the entire ground. That's now acting as a two-stage pump. So when the heat rises, it pulls the radon into that area and then rises again every time the heater kicks on. Mm-hmm. So it does counter the mitigation or increase the numbers if you don't have a mitigation.
Okay, so it's more affected by heat, your furnace, as opposed to a really hot day when you might have windows open, or
windows open
AC
are typically going to let air pass through the house.
Right. Okay.
Theoretically, that could bring, and this is deep in literature, anything depressurizing the house is going to increase the radon level. Yeah. So if you have the windows on the west side of the house open only, and the wind is blowing west, it could be pulling air out of your house and depressurizing it. I've never created these experiments, but this is just this is definitely in the scriptures of radon.
I like that.
Yeah.
The book of radon.
Yeah.
Are there other things that people might unknowingly be doing around their homes that, could be adding to a potential problem?
100%. Anything that you do that's going to take air away from the structure and not replace it is depressurizing the structure. And when you're depressurizing the structure, you're countering what the radon system does. So, for instance, there's people that have the bathroom fan is wired on one switch to the light switch. Using a bathroom fan as normal is totally fine. You can do what you got to do. But people that let them run all day long with the light on and the fan running, just taking air from the house, that can increase the radon levels.
Okay.
Things like that. There's probably a million examples, but that's the simplest, that's the most common one that I see regularly, is that. So the basics on how a radon system works is people think it's sucking radon out, and it's not necessarily sucking radon out. The source of it's not going to go away. What it's doing is creating a negative air pressure under the concrete slab or vapor barrier in a crawl space. It's creating a negative air pressure. So now, in essence, the house itself is sitting down on the radon. It's no longer in relationship. Basically, the house is positively charged in relationship to where the radon comes from. So if it's a negative air pressure and it's positive above the concrete slab, above the vapor barrier, then radon's not gravitating into the negative void. So if it wasn't for the elements that work to pressurize the house, if you were to force air into the house at a greater rate than it's leaving, then it would do the same thing. But in the wintertime, that's a problem. With snow, you're pumping cold air and things like that.
Yeah.
So I've only done that method once, and that was a Cold War bomb shelter that my predecessors just probably didn't want to deal with because they were busy enough. But they said it couldn't be done, and it was 8-foot thick concrete walls. And I called my guru, and he said, here's what you're going to do. You're going to put a fan. It's a huge building, and it's a tiny room. You're going to put a fan in the doorway blowing into the room. That's it.
That's it.
That's it. And the radon went from really high, like 80 or 70 or something in that ballpark, to almost nothing.
Wow.
Just by putting a little fan and extension cord on it.
Anything unusual about us? Where does Western Montana rank in terms of, low, normal, high radon levels? And whatever the answer is, can you pinpoint any particular reasons why? Yeah,
well, we've got there's the EPA has and I'd encourage everyone to look at it. It's kind of interesting. It's not up to date, so I'm told. I hope that information is correct. I don't want to be spreading. So as interesting as it is outdated. Since 1993, there's about 10 million data points, I'm told, that haven't been entered in. But it's the EPA's radon zoning map. And it shows basically the color blobs of the United States.
Okay.
And it has Montana as, I'm pulling up here, is basically Zone 1. So basically that's, Zone 1 is typically going to have, they estimate that it typically on average is going to have over the EPA 4.0 or higher. So that's Zone 1. And places like parts of Texas, New Mexico. I'm going to cheat here and look at the map.
All right.
Arizona, that's more Zone 2. So they expect at the highest it'll be around that. And then Zone 3 is places like Alaska, Hawaii, major part of Texas, Florida, places like that where they don't anticipate it being very high. It doesn't mean it's not there.
Sure.
But just with all the data points that go into the pot, that's typically where on average we're going to be. You can expect it to be above for the EPA 4.0.
So above average.
Yeah.
It's fair.
And when I say 4.0, the measurement's picocuries per liter of oxygen. And that is that's not a unit of volume, that's a unit of radiation. And if anyone else wants their mind blown, I would YouTube, give YouTube a look at the radon cloud chamber. You can actually watch, and these guys make them at their house. It's a plexiglass box, and they put some fog in there, and you can literally see the radon molecules going off like firecrackers.
Wow.
And these guys are next level experts, but just by eyeballing it, they can guess roughly by the amount of action in the box what the radon level is.
Incredible. Missoula Real Estate Today, presented by Diane Beck and Becky Peterson, the Beck and Beck team at Windermere Real Estate here on News Talk KGVO. And my guest is Sean Murphy, owner of Murphy Radon here in Missoula. Also thanks to a couple of Diane and Becky's marketing partners that help bring you the show as well. Miles Link at Opportunity Bank of Montana and Rob Fleming at Man Mortgage. And back to Sean Murphy with Murphy Radon. How about radon reduction systems, Sean? That's a service you provide. What makes that an effective product?
Well, it's the only thing I've seen that, an active system. You hear a lot about passive systems. I've personally never witnessed one that actually worked. Because with a passive system, basically it's everything but a fan motor, and typically, I have to walk that fine line because the builders and plumbers that put them in aren't, as far as I know, they're not required to fully know what they're doing, because it is so simple, but it's also really simple not to do it right. It's not rocket science, but so then I'm in a position where, the builder told me this, so I don't want to be bad-mouthing the builder because it's, most people, I wouldn't want to be a builder. I stand in these beautiful homes and people say, my builder's a moron, and I look around and I go, is he though? He looks pretty good to me. So I have to then, when I hear, it's got a passive system already, I'm like, oh gosh, here we go. I got to get my spiel ready to not make the builder look bad, not make it look like I'm trying to badmouth anybody, and somehow explain to them that it might not be as cheap as they were expecting.
Yeah.
Because what they have, in essence, it's not typically what the builders and plumbers do. If it isn't correct, is not a waste of time by any means. I do have a pipe that's hidden in the building, so I don't have to put the ugly thing on the side of your house. But I don't know if a piece of pipe would necessarily make up an entire system. I don't know if I'd use the word system with one piece of pipe, but that's just me. So typically, those passive systems, they don't quite do the job. Okay. But if it is a true passive system with everything ready to go, it's just plug and play with a fan. And if it's done right, it's a success every time. But if not, then you got to go find out why isn't it working and what the other guys do and that sort of thing. So I prefer to do it all myself, just because once you're working in with large pipes, once you're working in one direction, you don't have a target point that you have to hit. But when you're trying to land on one spot that's already there, designated, that's a lot harder than just, when you drill your initial hole in the side of a house, I mean, if it's an inch one way, an inch the other, it probably doesn't matter. But when you're trying to line up with what someone else has already done, sometimes it can be a little trickier. So sometimes it's not necessarily easier and this and that. But I encourage all builders to at least call me. If they did nothing more than just have me show up and run the pipe through the structure and walk away. Yeah. For future date. And even if I wasn't the one doing it, I wouldn't care. I punch a lot of holes in houses no one's lived in. And then the builders are like, well, it's a bunch of BS. And I'm like, okay, well, yet here we are. BS or not, which I'm not a scientist, so I didn't do the research. At some point, we're taking somebody's word for stuff. Lung cancer is caused from smoking. I'm willing to accept that, and I didn't do that research either.
Right.
So when the builders say it's a bunch of BS, it's like, okay, well, you're snagged by it, and now you can't sell the house until it's done. So BS, not BS. I don't see in this particular moment how it's relevant.
I'd like to expand on some of that a little further.
Sure.
I have asked you a lot about testing. What does an actual mitigation involve for you at Murphy Radon?
A mitigation?
Yeah.
So a mitigation, if it's a crawl space, it's typically going to be, you got to put a new vapor barrier down, you seal it to the foundation. You have perforated pipe underneath it that transitions to solid pipe above the vapor barrier that's sealed, which then gets either to the outside of the building or to an attic where the fan is, and then exhausts either through the roof if it's in the attic or around the eave to clear the roof line on the exterior. Less ideal because most people ask me, are these things ugly? And I'm like, oh yeah. I used to do water features that were on the covers of magazines, so I know what something that looks good looks like, and this isn't it. Yeah. No one's. Well,
this isn't a beauty contest either.
Yeah, it's not as ugly as lung cancer. I'll tell you that
for sure. And
I usually can find a really good place to put them. I understand. I used to be a paramedic, so I was able to form that mindset where people are freaking out, and this is their first emergency they've ever been in their life. Well, same thing. It's their first radon. So even though it's routine to me, and sometimes way in the back of my head, I'm like, oh gosh, like relax, people. But this is their first time dealing with it. Yeah. So I get it. Even though sometimes I in my head, I'm like, oh, I got to answer this question again. But then you just got to smack yourself and be like, they don't know. This is their first time dealing with it.
Exactly.
So this is the first time that that's why the questions. So people will rearrange their entire life because they don't know me. And when I tell someone, don't worry, I have it under control. Yeah. And if you don't like it, I'll do it twice. And I don't want to do that. So, but still, they'll rearrange their whole life to be there morning of to make sure. And where they pick to put the system is where I would have put it. You mean the place where you can't see it? Yeah. I think they're worried about it going next to their doorbell or something, which I've never had to do.
Well, but you have customer peace of mind that way.
For sure. If that's what I got to do to make someone happy, is include them in on the process. Because hey, I mean it. If someone was like, I can't believe you put it here. Why didn't you put it there? And it was, oh my gosh, I missed that one. Then I would redo it, and I don't want to do that. So
excellent customer service.
It's easier to It's easier to answer a few extra questions and waste 5 minutes of time than to do the whole thing again.
Gosh, I probably should have opened this. So we're 21 minutes in here, and you did a great job, explaining what radon is, and you've touched upon some concerns. But what are the biggest fears and worries about radon in any home, business, wherever, being around it? How about that?
Lung cancer is the main one.
Right.
I've read a lot of things about different symptoms and things like that, but that's the only one that I can find that's the real. I was actually just Googling it last night to see, because it changes, and I have to also see what's going on Google now and then, because that's what my customers look at, and they Google themselves up panic attacks and have read some stuff that I've never heard before. And so, persistent coughs, things like that. But I definitely have been in many situations where just an offhanded comment as I'm working, oh, I can't wait till you're done today. My wife will finally be able to breathe. And I'm like, well, what's going on? I don't want you to feel ripped off if I leave here and she still has issues. Because it's not an allergen. It's not, So it's basically what it is. It's electrostatically charged, the particle radon, and it clings to dust. You breathe in the dust. So now it's in your lungs, and when it goes through radioactive decay, basically that little molecule is exploding like a little hand grenade in the shrapnel or the alpha rays of radiation. And one of those rays then hits a nucleus of a lung cell dead center. It could now form mutation, which then could form into cancer. That's the concern. So the higher the radon level, I've kind of drew an analogy once. I hope I don't fumble my own analogy here, but basically you got the dartboard, and how high the radon level is how many darts are in your hand at once. And how many throws you get is how long you live in there. And a bullseye would be lung cancer. So if it's very minimal, if it's very, there's a calculation you do when you have actual employees that in other states they closely regulate it, and it's working levels, and it's basically, to put it to you simply, if this studio we're in right now was 1,000 radon level, but you had to be in here 1 minute a month, probably wouldn't be that bad. So it's a scale there, or living in just barely over the line, a little bit high for 30 years. That's way worse than going into much higher concentrations for very short periods of time.
So what prompts customers to call you? I'm sure every call is different, but what prompts them to call you? Are there any indicators they might suspect that suggest they could use a radon inspection?
Currently, I would say 90% are just real estate transactions, and it's been that way most of the time I've been doing this. 90% it comes up in the inspection.
Okay,
and then a lot of ones I get, a lot of phone calls I get are, now they've lived there 20 years and they're selling their house. Well, when I bought it, it was 0. Now it's 30. What happened to my house? Okay. The question, more than likely, you either had a major geological event just under your house, or accidentally, intentionally, it's not the time to level accusations. You can't, because it would be so simple for someone's kid showing the house to, check this out, leave a window open, and now your radon test is your results. Typically, your results are going to be on the low side with an error. I've only personally witnessed an error that was high once, and it was very close to here, probably within a quarter mile of here, and it was barely over the line, 5 picocuries. And then after mitigating it, I'm expecting 0.2, 0.3. Everything went smooth, and it came back at 2,500. Well, obviously, there's something wrong with my machine. They go a little bonkers sometimes. I've never seen 2,500, let alone on a house I just mitigated. So I set up another machine in the same place, and it got 2,800. I'm like, okay, this is bizarre.
You're going the wrong way.
Yeah, and so now I have like 2 bonker machines? I don't think so. So I now am going to different parts of the house, and it came back at 0.2 each machine. And what I was doing was I was setting it too close to a modem and the electronics behind a TV. That's the only thing I can think of that was throwing it off. Just it's that sensitive of equipment.
Wow.
Yeah. It's very, a radon molecule is very small. So I have no idea how those machines work, but they're definitely very sensitive. So those are the errors I've seen. But for the most part, when someone say, well, I don't know, I want another test, I say, I typically don't go off the number. People want to send me the report and this and that, and it's not a waste of my time totally, but it would have to be a very high number for me to treat it any differently. If it came back at 5 versus 100, more than likely I'm not doing anything different as far as how you take away the driving force of the radon. Okay. The concentration level doesn't really affect it.
Yeah. In the final couple minutes here, let me ask you a little more about that. In most industries, there is ever-changing technology. Any newer gadgets or gizmos you've acquired at Murphy Radon that have made your services even more efficient? I imagine you have to invest in equipment now and again.
I have one I'm a little upset about, actually. I just went to a radon convention in Orlando.
Yeah.
And got to actually put a face to all the names I talk to on the phone all the time, my suppliers and things like this. And I met a guy who came up with this cube. So in situations where a farmhouse built in 1860 and the foundation's made of chalk, it's kind of hard to seal to it. So I had to come up with, basically it's, in my mind, I said, well, let's recreate a basement situation, just dig a sump extra deep in the ground. And this guy has a little snap together thing that he got a patent for that does exactly what I do. And he made a lot of money. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Oh, man.
So, but the fan technology is always improving. What the superpower go-to fan when I couldn't figure it out and just hit it hard, the nuclear option I call it, they have better ones now. And but to be honest with you, when I have to go to that option, a lot of times it's something even bigger. Yeah. It's not just, hey, set it and forget it. It's like, no, there's still problems. There's some that you can actually stack on top of each other to create superpower suction. And there was a basement I was working on in Bozeman, like a cowboy. They said they couldn't do it out there, so I said, I'll give it a shot. I didn't give them any guarantee, but I have 4 systems in with 16 points of suction. It's an 8,500 square foot basement, in-floor radiant heat, every nightmare, and I'm nowhere with this thing. I haven't even put a dent in it, and I don't know what's going on in it. More than likely, it has to do with wind. It's a windy area in Bozeman, and it's way up on a hill. Bigger houses are harder. Houses on hills are harder. Where are the biggest houses? Up on the hills. And I think this big sail of a mountainside catches the air and it just is constantly
crazy.
It's generating more force than I could counter driving the radon in.
Yeah.
And that would have been a prime situation to do a pre-mitigation before they poured the slab, and then they wouldn't have any problems. But that's a real tough one after the fact with, 8,500 square foot basement. That's a big house.
It is. My guest this week on Missoula Real Estate Today, presented by Diane Beck and Becky Peterson, the Beck and Beck team at Windermere Real Estate, has been Sean Murphy of Murphy Radon. If you have some concerns or more curiosity about, good guy to work with. If we want to get a hold of Murphy Radon, what the heck do we do anyway?
Well, you could either call Murphy Radon is 406-531-3860 or email murphyradon@gmail.com. Real easy.
Excellent. Sean Murphy with Murphy Radon on Missoula Real Estate Today. Glad you come back in. Thanks.
Hey, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Missoula Real Estate Today, presented by Diane Beck and Becky Peterson, the Beck and Beck team at Windermere Real Estate. For current listings and services Beck and Beck provide, visit movetomissoula.com. That's Missoula.com. We'll see you next time on Missoula Real Estate Today.